Destiny of a Savior by Famous Fault. Chapter 4, Professor Magician. Harry had considered it, continuing with History of Magic, but since he had flunked the subject, he couldn't. Professor Muto had been a great teacher, and Harry would have liked to continue the lessons, but Professor Muto wasn't there anymore. He hadn't taught Newt students anyway, so in the end, dropping the subject was not something Harry did with grief. Nonetheless, he was curious about the new history teacher, just like the rest of the school, but he couldn't imagine anyone to leave a greater impact than the previous had. Harry was not all too surprised to learn that several people in his year would be continuing the subject. Dean Thomas, Lavender Brown, Neville, and even Hermione. He had no idea how it was in the other houses, but he suspected that at least Tracy would continue. Hermione would inform him soon enough. More importantly, she could tell them about the new history teacher who was sitting in silence at the very end of the staff table and wasn't eating. Harry was a bit divided. He wasn't sure if he did or didn't want someone like Professor Muto again. His lessons had actually been great. They had had a large impact on the required dislike between the Gryffindors and Slytherins. On the other hand, the PTSD had not been something Harry appreciated. If he didn't dream about Sirius or the graveyard, he dreamed about his distant memories. He still couldn't quite grasp them. To consciously conjure them was still something he couldn't do. Hermione had left for ancient ruins, and after Harry's and Ron's timetable had been cleared, they went to the common room to spend their first free period there. Already the first day, Professor Magician proved to be just as mysterious as Professor Muto. It was during their first defense against the dark arts class that Professor Magician made his first real appearance before Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Nearly all of the sixth years of all houses had taken defense against the dark arts. Parvati Patil was sitting in front of Harry, Tracy was sitting next to Dean, and it was a surprise that she had retaken regular lessons. Malfoy was sitting in a far corner, together with Crabbe and Goyle. There were also a fair amount of Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs. The subject was popular. The room had already adapted Snape's personality. The windows were covered, and the room was lit by candles only, giving it an eerie feeling. Pictures, gruesome pictures, were hanging on the walls. Snape looked at them with darkly glowing eyes. "I have not asked you to take out your books," Snape said, closing the door and moving to face the class from behind his desk. Hermione hastily dropped her copy of Confronting the Faceless back into her bag and stowed it under her chair. "I wish to speak to you, and I want your fullest attention." He looked over them once more, lingering on several faces, including Harry's. Then he went on, complaining about the other teachers which had taught the subject earlier. He paced through the room while doing so. Then his voice became lower, almost loving. "The dark arts," said Snape, "are many, varied, ever-changing, and eternal. Fighting them is like fighting a many-headed monster which each time a neck is severed sprouts a head even fiercer and cleverer than before. You are fighting that which is unfixed, mutating, indestructible." Probably every student in the classroom stared at Snape with various emotions on their faces. Those emotions quickly changed to surprise when a voice from behind them spoke. Everyone turned, and her gaze fell upon a man with creamy white robes covering him all the way down to the floor, and Harry wondered how it came that he didn't stumble over them while walking. "Spoken like someone who knows their true nature. I'm impressed. You must have battled them fiercely," Professor Magician said with a neutral expression. He had black painted lines under his eyes that clearly indicated that he was part of something not everyone knew about. Harry could have sworn he had seen them before, somewhere. "Battled them?" Harry suppressed the urge to snort. If anything, Snape had learned that by using them. It was, after all, Voldemort who had taught Snape the darkest of magics. Harry had expected Snape to give some dry and unfriendly comment, like he had treated most teachers through the years. But he did not. Instead, he looked at Professor Magician with the utter surprise written over his face. When Professor Magician realized he wouldn't receive a reply, his expressionless mask vanished instantly. He frowned and added, "Anyone knows a dragon has fangs, but no one knows how sharp they are until bitten by them." He made his way forward, and Harry was pretty sure that he was the only one who realized that he didn't hear a single sound, which indicated footsteps. Professor Magician had a hushed conversation with Professor Snape, which unfortunately Harry couldn't hear. It ended with Snape nodding shortly. It was odd. The Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, who usually was so condescending, was treating the new teacher with a lot of respect. Almost fearful respect. Odd was the word. Snape shook his head as he watched Professor Marcheshon walk out to the classroom. Harry heard Ron whisper to Hermione, "The moment you've had a class with that guy, you are going to tell us everything." Professor Marcheshon was quickly forgotten, and Snape called their attention back on what he had to teach them. The non-verbal spells were not easy, and of course, once again, he clashed with Snape, earning him a detention on Saturday. Not much later, he received a message from Dumbledore telling him their private lessons would start on Saturday, the same time as Harry's detention would have been. When their after-lunch break was over, the three friends together made their way to their first potion class of the year. Like Cole had told himself, he did eat breakfast with Aunt. He had hesitatingly made his way over to the Gryffindor table, and as soon as Aunt had seen him, he had waved both his hands in the air. "Here!" he had called out, ignoring all the staring people. Cole had hesitated a little while, but when he saw Tracy Davis sitting among the Gryffindors, he too made his way over there. The two of them discussed everything they had learned yesterday eagerly. Aunt had heard Cole call out the ghosts' names and asked, "How do you know her? Did you know her?" "Only my name and face. She was a first-class duelist," Cole said. "Was that the Rebecca Hawkins?" Aunt asked, his eyes wide. "Not possible!" "Do you duel?" Cole asked, surprised. "Since recently, Yugi was so awesome. My dad showed me. The ones that can be seen, that is. His brother was there when Muto dueled the first duel in Battle City. By coincidence, that is. Actually, the only duel one can watch properly is the one with Leon von Schroeder," Cole filled in. "I know. It's too bad he disappeared," Aunt sighed and attacked his pudding with a fork. Cole didn't see any logic in that, but he decided that there was no point in asking. "He was seen in London, though." "I was there," Cole muttered, deciding not to tell that he was in the possession of Yugimoto's dag. Something was telling him to keep it secret, not just from Aunt, but from everyone. It would be his sacred secret. Aunt's mouth fell wide open. "You were not! You met Yugimoto? What happened?" "Well, Mom and Dad tried to drag me away from there, but I went anyway. Everyone who recognized him kind of built a wall in front of him and Rebecca. They were there together. Someone was angry and asked him if he had heard all the rumors." Cole started, doing his best to recall the day. "There were loads of rumors," Aunt said with a dark smile. "They are pretty mean." Cole chuckled. He hadn't heard them, and he said he wasn't interested either. Then he asked if he could pass. That was pretty much all the words he had to spare for us in the beginning. He was neither shy nor kind, like the rumor has he was. In fact, it was pretty sharp. Someone told him that he was selfish for not giving up his title. Cole laughed again. Once he was done, no one felt as if they would ever reach up to the point where they could claim the title anyway. He asked them what gives someone the right to that title. "Being the best," Aunt said immediately. Cole laughed once and shook his head. Someone else said that too. Yugi used Bandit Keith as an example. In the end, Yugi's opinion was that someone has to know the game before they can make a claim for that title. Aunt just raised an eyebrow. "Know the game? I know the game." Cole kept shaking his head. "You think you do? You don't." Rebecca, who was thoroughly annoyed, told us the origins of the game in a neat summary. I don't know the game. I can play it, but there it ends. Anyway, Dad had a conversation with Yugimoto afterwards. He never told me about it, though. How cool! They were on their way to a funeral, Cole added as a gloomy side note. And now Rebecca. He must really feel haunted by death. I asked him if he was back. Cole rested his head on his hand. He said he couldn't duel again. It reminded him of his friends, his dead friends, and that it was just too hard. He said his days as a duelist were over, but to me, the king of games will always be Yugimoto. Unbeknownst to the two boys, McGonagall had listened in on nearly their entire conversation, and she had listened awestruck, completely forgetting to hand out timetables. Having nothing to do with the Muggle world, she, just like all the other teachers, had no idea that their previous history teacher had been known throughout the world. Hearing the two boys talk about him like that was both refreshing and a shock. Apparently, he couldn't go anywhere without leaving an impression, and apparently he disappeared everywhere equally sudden. She wondered if they knew about the spirit. They couldn't, though. It would not be accepted in their world any more than in hers. I can't believe he's been here, Anne said, still attempting to eat his pudding with a fork, having more success than Cole would have hoped were possible. According to Peter and Luna, he was their previous history teacher. That was why everyone went so quiet when the new one was introduced. He said their previous history was something out of the ordinary. When Rebecca said Professor Muto, Cole didn't feel the need to explain further. Mr. Berkulu, McGonagall said, interrupting him. Your timetable. I suggest you, Mr. Clancy, go to the Ravenclaw table so Professor Flintpick can give you your timetable. She had looked at them sternly. She wasn't sure she had enjoyed their conversation. She felt as if she should have known. She was surprised, too. Shouldn't any of the other students have recognized him and given him away? Then she looked at Darcy Davis, a face she was used to seeing at her house's table now. She and Dean had been in the ministry to aid Professor Muto. Had they known? Both of them had a Muggle parent. She shook her head, reminding herself that the mysterious Professor Muto was gone and not coming back. Cole quickly obeyed her, just in time to receive a timetable. He located flying pretty quickly since that seemed so awesome, although probably something more in Ant's style. Then he looked at the rest of the classes. History of magic, charms, transfiguration, herbology, potions, defense against the dark arts. It all seemed like more fun than mathematics. He'd be having potions and herbology with the Hufflepuffs, he noted, history of magic and charms with the Slytherins. That meant he'd be having transfiguration and defense against the dark arts with the Gryffindors, the Ant. His first class of the day was history of magic. It would start in 20 minutes. He was in no hurry. He was pleased to see that he'd have his first class with Ant directly after transfiguration. Wednesday mornings, he'd have a double period flying. On Fridays, after lunch, double potions, and on Tuesdays, after lunch, double defense against the dark arts. It was a truly interesting timetable for the first time in his life. Considering the size of the castle, he decided that perhaps he should start looking for the right room as soon as he could. There was a fair chance he would be late if he wouldn't. He mimicked the word later to Ant before he stood up and left in order to find his way to the correct classroom. Outside the Great Hall, he was met by a stripped and spotted animal who looked at him as if he had let her wait for a week rather than half an hour. What? He asked Jun, who indignantly jumped up on his shoulder. Find some friends among the other cats. You can't follow me around all day. Jung did not reply in any way, and Cole silently wondered why he had bothered with a cat, or perhaps with a cat like Jun. Maybe the German Rex had been a better idea. Yet there was something about Jun which made her feel absolutely necessary. The hourglasses had not been repaired. The glass and gems were gone, but the spot in the entrance hall wall in which the hourglasses had stood was empty. He wondered if Rebecca's opinion really was enough for the headmaster to refrain from the point system. Like Cole had expected, he walked around 10 minutes hoping to find a clue as to where he was supposed to go. But instead, he got hopelessly lost. He had no idea as to where he was. He looked around, the lights were green, and for some reason he had the idea that he was beneath the ground, although it was hard to tell with all the stairs he'd been going up and down as they were moving around. You shouldn't be here, a female voice said from behind him. Cole turned around quickly and was met by the sight of a dark figure with long hair looking slightly unreal in the green light. She took another step towards him, and then Cole recognized her as the Slytherin werewolf, Tracy. She looked tired and worn, black shadows under her sad eyes. I'm sorry, I got lost. I have no idea where I am, he said hastily, tripping over his words. Go a little further, and you'll end up far too close to the Slytherin common room. They won't accept someone like you to be around this part of the castle. Don't give them any reasons to single you out, she said with a sigh. What are you looking for? The history of magic classroom, Cole said, unsure about what to think of the encounter. Tracy laughed without real amusement in the sound. Then you really are lost. I should hang up signs here. Wonder why they haven't done that yet. I'll show you the way. In silence, she took the lead and led him back the way he came and up several stairs, through a lot of hallways, until they reached the history of magic classroom just as Professor Marcheshan arrived. Thanks a lot, he said sincerely. Tracy just blinked at him before turning around and walking away, her head and shoulders hanging. She looked like the personification of sadness itself. Cole did not recall Peter explaining why, but he remembered Peter saying that Tracy was a friend of his and Rebecca being his best friend. Wouldn't it be natural for Tracy and Rebecca to know each other? The death of a friend would make anyone walk like that. Professor Marcheshan didn't say a word. Instead, he just made gesture for them to enter. So they did. The room which met them had, to Cole's surprise, no benches at all. Cushions were strewn over the floor at random, and the colors of the walls were many, although dark magenta and red were superior to the others. The teacher in his white robes walked towards a little step up with a small pillow and sat down there. It took a while for the hesitating first years to sit down, unsure if that even was what they were supposed to do. Professor Majichan just watched them with a serious expression, giving away no emotion whatsoever. Eventually, the students sat, and it took additional minutes until they realized he was waiting for them to get quiet. "Next time you enter this classroom," he said, sounding almost bored, "you will sit down and be quiet at once. Understood?" The students just nodded. There was something about this man which would not allow jokes or anything alike as long as he was in charge. "Good. This is your first day at the school, your first class, even." He still had no emotion in his voice. "This same thing counts for me. You are still very young, yet already is this world affecting you far more than it should. You are closing your minds to possibilities that you can't even imagine. It is my job to teach you why magic is the way it is today. That is what I will do." Cole frowned. There was nothing of a teacher over this guy. Not any teacher Cole had met, anyway. A Ravenclaw next to Cole raised his hand. Professor Majichan just looked at the boy. It took a while until the boy realized that it was permission to talk. Cole wondered how Professor Majichan expected them to understand him if he didn't say anything. "My sister told me we were supposed to learn about Emmerich the Evil and Ulrich the Oddball, about the Warlocks Convention of 1709, about the Goblins' Rebellion, and several dates of magical discoveries. She also told me we would learn about the inventor of the self-stirring cauldron and the 1637 werewolf code of conduct, and lastly, the uprising of Ulfric the Eager," the boy said, looking at the professor with doubt in his eyes. Professor Majichan just looked at the boy for a minute before he said something. "Dusty Parks," he said slowly, as if tasting the word. "That's a full-blood family. You grew up in a home in which your parents use magic daily, and you have known about the school for as long as you can remember. You won't be easy." Aside from that, Professor Majichan gave no explanation to the rather odd words. "There are some things you need to know. Considering the times, they are more important now than ever," the professor said with a troubled look in his grey eyes. Then he looked around at them, and Cole swore that they were blue now. "First, I want you to all take your wands out." The confused students did as they were instructed, and Cole knew he was missing a lot which others here understood just fine. Or, more accurately, they understood why it was weird since they knew more about it. Then approximately 20 wands flew through the air into a wooden box behind the professor. Startled cries went through the crowd. "You won't be needing them," he said without emotion. Not one of the students dared to say anything about it. Naturally, they wouldn't need them. It was history. But did that mean that he had to take them? Cole seemed to be one of the few who was curious more than startled. "You are all aware of the war which is going on outside the castle, which is also going on inside the castle. The belief that certain wizards are better than others because they are so-called full-bloods. I am certain that there are those among you who share that opinion, and since that is what you have been taught by your parents and others around you, what I will teach you, hopefully, puts a breach in that belief." Fascination was the only emotion Cole felt at the moment. He had distanced himself from the fact that he was Muggle-born and would therefore become one of those who would be hunted, if you know who would gain power. Whispers went through the students, especially among the Slytherins. Professor Majichan patiently waited for them to go quiet. "I have a question for you," the professor whispered, not feeling the need to raise his voice even once. "In which country lays the origin of magic?" A Ravenclaw girl held up a hand, and once again Professor Majichan just looked at the student to give them permission to speak, though for some reason Cole thought the professor looked disappointed. "Egypt," she said, full conviction. The professor looked at her for a moment, then at the rest of them. "Yes," he said. "I know." Once again, surprised whispers went through the crowd. Cole wondered how long it would take until Professor Majichan would lose patience with them. When the whispers didn't cease, he thought about Rebecca's words. Already 5,000 years before even the Egyptians, it is said that the people of Atlantis were aware of the beasts in our souls, and when in need they asked for help from the cause of the dead, who lived in a separate dimension. Although it was just a game, there had always been something more to it, and both Yugi Moto and Rebecca Hawkins had been at Hogwarts, so perhaps... Cole hesitatingly raised a hand. Professor Mashishan looked at Cole, his eyes now a mixture between blue and gray. Now Cole understood why it had taken the other students such a long time to say anything. It was simply a physical impossibility, but the professor looking at one like that. Is it possible that its origins lays in Atlantis? Cole suggested. What he had not suspected was for his classmates to start laughing at him. Slytherins and Ravenclaws alike laughed at him mercilessly. Cole started to blush, but Professor Mashishan just nodded at him, letting him know that it was okay. The Atlanteans were among the first to use certain forms of magic, he stated with a low and calm voice. The class went silent at once. The truth, however, is that magic has existed just as long as this earth has, probably even longer. The origins of magic, as you know it, however, lays in Egypt, my homeland. Magic has not always been the way as it is today, and today still not all magic is the same. Can anyone tell me the difference between a wizard and magician? No one dared raising their hands. No? The professor sounded surprised, although Cole was almost sure there was a pleased hint in his tone. You are wizards and witches. You use the magic that is within you and channelize it through a wand, using incantations to strengthen your spells. It is something genetic, something passed on from parent to child, ancestor to a coming generation, something in your blood. Professor Mashishan went quiet, watching the reactions closely. Magicians, at the other hand, work differently. They use outer magic, magic that is everywhere in the world around us. The possibilities are far less limited, and they are less dependent on willpower and emotion, while at the same time their spiritual awareness grows to levels no wizard or witch could ever reach. It is also a choice. The students just stared at him, not quite sure what to say about that. Eventually, a Ravenclaw spoke up. You are a magician, aren't you, sir? Professor Mashishan nodded. Yes, I am. The Ravenclaw got a look in the eyes, thirsting for more knowledge. Could you show us, sir? Could you let us experience the difference? It is my job to teach you the difference between outer and inner magic, as this is important to the origin of magic as you know it. The professor smiled at them for the first time that day. He held out two hands, as if he wanted to stop something. Then he started moving them. He made signs and gestures Cole did not understand, and they were all watching, fascinated. First, he made a circular motion, or at least Cole thought it was circular in the end. It was hard to tell. Then, after several more complicated movements, one could hear a Slytherin student call out, Where are we? Cole looked away from the hands, and so did the rest of the students to look around instead. They were still sitting on cushions, but now they were outside, sitting in the exact same formation on the grass close to the lake. Cole never noticed moving around at all, and it was pretty shocking to suddenly find oneself in a completely different place. One of the greatest advantages of outer magic is that the one submitted to it doesn't need to feel it, Professor Mashishan explained. I could easily transport you from here to the other side of the world and back, without you noticing it. How come we don't notice it, sir? A Ravenclaw asked curiously. When you are at the receiving point of a spell, regardless of the intention, it affects the magic inside you. You lose control over your own magic, and so it affects you. For example, the levitation spell. If you are put under that spell, it is the magic inside you which makes you levitate, and since that is in your blood, you'll feel it. A wizard or witch has the ability to always know if another wizard or witch has put them under a spell. They just can't help it. Outer magic is completely different. A magician affects the energies of this world, of this universe. Energies you cannot feel. A quick-thinking Slytherin raised a hand. The professor went quiet and just stared at her. If our magic affects the magic in other people, then how come we can put muggles under spells? Good question. That is what brings us to the original lesson I had in mind. I was going to tell you about the origin of the first wizard and witches. Muggles, as you call them, play a great role in that. He looked at them and started making his gestures again, much less obvious now. It almost looked like nervous fidgeting. But the next thing Cole knew was that they were back in the classroom. As if nothing had happened, he continued. Magicians existed before wizards and witches did. Magic exists in all of us. No human being is born without magic in their system. although it is more of a spiritual awareness than magic. Once it rested latent in every human being. Sometimes it happens that a person experienced that the impossible happened, but it was written of as willpower. However, it did not rest completely latent in all people. From the beginning, there have been people who consciously could achieve things above the ordinary. These people are still known as psychics, mediums, shamans, and healers. It was in ancient Egypt that people who discovered their special abilities started to document them. They worked on enhancing them, and eventually they learned about the latent energies within people that in some people was more active. They did not take long before they learned about the highly active energies around us, and they did their best to tap into them. Those who succeeded became the first magicians. I'll teach more about them later. However, the magic inside a magician becomes even more latent than that of most people, since they do not need it. That makes it so hard to curse a magician. To become a magician is a full-time job, a job which has to be started from a very young age and which never ends. Magicians had no contact with their families and never started any either. It was after the Egyptian age of peace that one young magician decided to leave the knowledge behind and started a family. It did not take long before he realized that the children his wife gave birth to had an unusual, active, magical ability. His children were the first wizards and witches. The theory is that the children inherited their mother's inner magic, and that it was combined with their father's connection to the highly active outer magic, thus triggering it to become active inner magic. Your magic. To Cole, this was not the least surprising. He had expected pretty much anything. To the rest of the class, this was apparently groundbreaking news. Most of the Slytherins were gaping at the teacher as if what he had said was complete nonsense. From what Cole had heard about the war to them, it probably sounded like an insult. Not one of them protested, though. They didn't dare. Cole doubted that Professor Majichan would have gotten away with those statements had it been older students he had been teaching. This lesson got slightly out of hand, Professor Majichan said and sighed. Just look at the time. From now on, our lessons will be more concentrated. We'll start with the first magicians on Wednesday. Then he made a gesture for them to leave. Cole got up in silence, just like the rest of the class, and in equal silence, they left. Cole turned around the final time to look at their history teacher and saw the first real emotion show on his face. It was agony, the heartbreaking kind of agony. Cole was so startled by the expression that he more stumbled than walked out of the classroom. "There is nothing special about Professor Majichan at all," Dean declared to yet another student who came and asked him about it on the morning of the Quidditch tryouts. The 6th and 7th years, who had not continued to Newt level in history of magic, occasionally harassed those who had. They all wanted to know if the new professor was just as special as Professor Muto had been, or perhaps just as disastrous, depending on point of view. Harry and Ron had actually not been much better. They had harassed Hermione just as badly. But she too had proclaimed that they learned little else from what Professor Binns had taught them. Dates, wars, names, inventions, the usual boring stuff. The only thing that was weird about him was the obvious lack of emotion he showed under all circumstances. Everyone had shoved that on him being a magician, but Hermione had told Harry and Ron that although magicians did not require emotions to make their magic work, it was encouraged. It would be just as odd for him as for anyone to simply lose all emotion. All in all, Harry and Ron didn't have the time to worry about the history teacher. They had more homework than ever before, and the only subject Harry felt he was even remotely good at was potions, thanks to the Half-Blood Prince. Tracy, Peter, and Dean had asked Harry, Hermione, and Ron if they wanted to come along and search for Rebecca, but Harry had declined. Actually, he wanted to forget about the previous history teacher and anything that had to do with him, Rebecca amongst them. Ron had declined too, needing to keep up with his homework. Hermione had gone along, returning unsuccessfully. They had not found Rebecca, and Harry would not have been surprised if Rebecca had consciously chosen not to be found. She would have been bombarded with questions from all students if found. Hermione had only one thing to say when she returned. The pharaoh's name was Atem. Nothing more was said about the matter. Until that point, it had been pretty easy for Harry to keep the two out of his mind. But a name just made things harder. He was glad nothing was odd about the new teacher, and he was glad that Professor Muto was gone. There was no denying he had saved their hide, but Harry felt bad every time he thought about the Japanese. It reminded him too much of how easy he had given in to his rage. The school acted pretty much as if Professor Muto had never been there at all, just like the school always had with the Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers. They came, they went. That was just the way it was. Then Harry was distracted by a sudden cry of joy from Tracy. Every Gryffindor who had heard her looked her way. Tracy wasn't usually one to express herself too vocally. She blushed but explained, "This is the first time in several months I did not receive a howler." Tracy still had to code her mail to make sure she wasn't harmed by it. People with objections against werewolves sent her dangerous mail almost daily, and it was a surprise if she got less than 3 howlers. Harry could understand she was pleased about not receiving a howler for once, even if it couldn't last. Although she now went to regular classes, she still slept in the room of requirement, both for her own safety and because she liked the place. Harry had been in Tracy's bedroom only once, but it had been pretty luxurious. It also was impossible to find if one didn't know what one was looking for, and if Harry hadn't been completely deceived, it happened that Dean slept there on occasions too. Not one of Dean's roommates would turn him in. Harry had even heard Seamus wishing him good luck a couple of times. Had the circumstances been normal, Harry probably would have wished Dean the same thing. But the fact was that Dean and Tracy were amongst the saddest figures in the entire school. They together with Peter, and Harry was convinced that all by all, they just really needed the comfort. He knew that Hermione had asked about the funeral, but Harry hadn't wanted to know. He was fed up with death for the moment. The mere expression on Hermione's face had been proof enough that the funeral hadn't been the best. Harry had made his mind long before he himself had even known it. He would not have anything to do with something that wasn't part of the war. Dumbledore's lessons came first. Voldemort's destruction came first. He wouldn't bother with anything else.